And this, it's a very a good way to follow through on our lesson on finance that we did the last class. The facility manager is a major buyer in the organization. Even if you don't directly do the buying for large organized organizations, you are a requester of buying activities. You are one of the major users of procurement services in the organization because you buy a large variety, and you spend a lot of money while buying. But in the finance class, we talked about how best value is defined in facility management. So today we're going to break that down and look at the entire procurement process and talk about contracts, the means with which we arrive at procurement. So today is going to be a very interesting class. So just please pay attention, make notes. I want us to have a robust discussion at the end of the class. Procurement is not buying or purchasing. Procurement is a systematic process by which an organization reaches formal contracts for purchasing or buying. So in essence, you could buy or purchase without procurement, all right? But if you want to have a formal contract or an agreement with a supplier of services or goods, you need to have a procurement process in place. And that's why we say it's a systematic process by which the organization reaches formal contracts. So the relationship between purchasing and procurement is that with procurement, there is a contract for purchasing. If you walk up to a shop, you exchange cash for goods or for services, you've done purchasing, you've not done procurement. Procurement has a series of processes for arriving at an agreement that we can call a contract for purchasing, okay? So that's how those keywords relate. So in a simplified way of purchasing is direct purchasing. A complex or more complicated way of purchasing is procurement. And why do you do that? Because certain purchasing has a very have serious risk, have other considerations that must be analyzed, agreed to, and documented. If that is required for a contract before you can purchase, then you are practicing procurement. The whole essence of procurement is to ensure that we maximize cost effectiveness and achieve the best value for money. We talked about best value, don't forget it. A clear, detailed, precise, concise specification at the cheapest or lowest price practicable, right? So you want to maximize that process of cost effectiveness. And then you want to protect yourself if you're the purchaser. You want to protect other organizations who probably are purchasing from you. So in essence, would-be purchasers, it's in their best interest to have a procurement process in place. And then there are laws and regulations that guide the procurement process. There are certain purchases you cannot just do, especially large ticket items, or when you work for a certain organization, because there are certain laws and regulations that governs such purchases in such organization, right? So if you find yourself in that situation, you must ensure that you have a procurement process in place so that you don't run foul of the rules and regulations of that of the country or of the organization, even the procedures and processes of the organization. You don't run foul of it. Okay. Treat all prospective suppliers and their representatives fairly and impartially. Impartiality is a key aspect of procurement, so that somebody is not just being worn out when the job is already intended for somebody else. reduce procurement process costs, and ensure continuous improvements. Adhere to organizational policies. So all kinds of policies exist in the organization. You could either use procurement as a means to enforce, adhere to, and comply with organizational policy, or you could end up, ignoring all of those organizational policies, and procurement becomes a way of circumventing policies. Policies such as sustainability, diversity, equality, and workforce issues might need to be enforced or implemented through procurement policies or procurement systems. So they're taking in accordance with high professional standards and ethics. With procurement, there's a lot of opportunity for corruption. There's a lot of opportunity for unethical behavior. Procurement now creates the process for protecting us against unethical behaviors, right? So professional standards are supposed to be very high when implementing procurement. It's also organized in an effective, structured way, and it's embedded in the organization. Develop management information and the use of information measures of procurement. So in essence, as we use procurement to acquire, there's other documentation, provides an information management system. It provides an evidence-based approach for making decisions on how we buy, what we buy, tracking what we have bought, analyzing to see what value we are getting from them, as well as historical data on how we are using those assets. Okay, so procurement is buying the right product at the right price at the right time. Okay, this is also called value for money. Okay, so we did a little bit of discussion around the whole process of making decisions as to what you really want. And this is just going to be a rehearsal or a revision. What you want is not an equipment. What you want is not an asset. What you want is not a piece of, a building, or, just name anything you have in your asset register. Those are not exactly what you want. What you really want is the utility they provide. And that's where you should start your thinking from, the utility they provide. What do I need that I use? I don't use a transformer. I don't use a generator. Okay, I don't use how would I put it, an air conditioner. They are not what I use. What I use is what I get from them. So an air conditioner provides me comfort, cooling. So that's what I need. All right. A generator or transformer provides me electricity, energy to run and operate my facility and provide, all the relevant support services to my building users. Now, if I don't focus intently on what utility I'm looking for, I might end up, in fact, in most cases, I make a mistake as to what I am acquiring. We end up acquiring something that does not give us the optimal results with regards to what we actually look for, okay? So whether you're going to purchase, whether you're going to lease, whether you're going to get that utility as a service, you need to, consider a lot of options, a lot of alternatives, the cost of various alternatives, especially if you understand life cycle costing and can use life cycle costing to analyze those alternatives, all right? The cash position of the organization. If we have plenty of cash, we can do more purchasing and less leasing, all right? If we have less cash, we need a lot of money to do our core business. We don't want to spend all that money purchasing equipment, hardware, facilities. No, we want to have that money in our business. So we rather lease. And then if an organization is going to derive value or benefits, like balance sheet considerations and other considerations from actually owning assets, then that becomes another like consideration. And then, of course, the term of use. If it's something I want to use briefly for a project, or I use it once in January, again in July, till next year, January again, I might decide that purchasing will not make sense because I'm going to hold it, I'm going to store it, warehouse it, I'm going to have costs attached to it when I only use it for short-term period and not regularly or routinely. And then risk. There are risks associated to owning certain assets. There are certain assets that requires you to have certain compliance requirements to the regulatory authorities. There are some that you need to have certain additional services supplied or applied to them just to make sure they don't become a hazard to your environment or to your people, right? And then another big reason why we need to consider whether to own, acquire, or to lease or go straight for the utility we're looking for is the need for flexibility. Is my requirement in terms of the volume, in terms of quantity and quality of this particular utility? Is it something that varies largely? Is it okay? So if I have a facility where at certain seasons my electricity requirement is 10 times the requirement in more than 6% of the time, for example, should I acquire a power generator that meets my peak? Should I acquire the one that meets my off-peak or seasons that are at the valley or trough? Or how do I manage that process of not even owning any of this so that I can just buy exactly what I need when I need it? If I need to have a cleaning service, for example, and I have a cleaning standard I want to maintain, and cleaning activities becomes very highly sought after, or the intensity of cleaning is higher in a certain season, do I want to employ so many cleaners in-house and then fire them again for the next season? Flexibility. If I have a need for flexibility, I probably just say, you know what, let me outsource that and begin to use the leasing or outsourcing approach. So whether you are an in-house FM or you're a contracted resource or a contractual organization, you must always think about what you want to buy to use and what you can rent. Just recently, there was an equipment I was supposed to buy that my technicians will use for maybe every 3 months. They'll do this scanning and recording and auditing, and the equipment's about 3.5 million. I just found out that renting it is 25K for 1 day, right? So why do I want to acquire an equipment for 3.5 million when I can rent it for 25,000, even if it's 50,000? If I were using it every day, the same equipment continuously, non-stop, it will never be packed up. I probably will add up 50,000 by 360 something and say, oh, 3 point something is cheaper. I'd rather buy it because I need it every day. But again, think about, make your analysis before you decide what you want to procure. Don't just procure something because it is due, So I hear all those, this generator is due for replacement, this AC is due. That's the language we speak right now. But please do not focus on that. Start from what you need. Start from how you can provide that resource or that solution, right? And then begin to invest your time and your analysis in working your way through options. If you decide whether it's to buy or to lease or to procure the utility directly from a provider, once you've made that decision, that's three choices to choose from, and you've made a choice, you now decide what are the options, what are the alternatives within one choice. So it branches out again into another 3, and then you get to the point where you say, this is what I'm looking for. And if there are options within that range as well, you analyze again, and you go on to the point where you say, this is what I recommend. Whoever is looking at your analysis, whether it's just outline analysis or 3-page or 5-page or 10-page write-up that describes everything with pictures, pros, cons, risk, and detailed analysis. Every time somebody looks at it, they see a professional job being done. So that's for acquiring. What about the services you render to your in-house users or as an FM contractor? You could decide to handle your services in-house. You could decide to outsource your services. You could decide to do anyone, right? But you must think about the benefits and its advantages, all right? If you are handling your services in-house, you employ people, you train them, you give them tools, you give them work processes, so on and so forth. There's a high likelihood that you'll be able to retain direct and complete control. These people will serve the master that pays them, right? So there will be no conflict of loyalty because, it's the person that is providing the employment and is paying the bills. They say he who pays the piper dictates the tune, isn't it? Now, but most organizations that you work for may not have the skills and capacity to manage in-house. They may not have what it takes to develop standard operating procedures for FM operations. Even if you are an in-house facility manager and you are asked to handle such operations, you might find it easier to outsource than trying to reinvent the wheel, because there's a lot of work involved in handling all your services in-house, right? So there's a lot of knowledge you'll need to acquire. And if you already have that, then you can say, we're not going to outsource because we know how to do everything in-house. Now, specialist training for providing certain specialist services in the facility management space is not something that you may also find in most organizations. So a bank, for example, may not even know how to recruit properly a facility manager, all right? So that might be a shortcoming, or a specialist in any specific area of facility management. The work may be carried out when core business management supervision is not on site, right? So if you are an in-house and you have every of your team in-house, there's a lot of risk that there will be poor supervision, because most of the work you want to do, especially in facilities, are going to be done outside the purview or the view of everybody in the organization. So management may not even have proper oversight. That's if they even know what to supervise or oversight in the first place, okay? And then, of course, you have the flexibility issue comes in again. Should we have people on standby? Should we have people we are paying for overtime? How do you take care of supervision or provision for those periods where somebody has to go on leave? Are you going to employ somebody temporarily to fit in at that time? If it's a controller, you know how to sort themselves out. It takes one person to another side, bring somebody from another side. They have a way of balancing it, all right? And then there are additional costs, which may be hidden costs. And this is a reality for most organizations. We may not realize the real cost, what we call cost to company of hiring someone. There are so many hidden costs that are tied to being the direct person who employs an individual. So some of the reasons why outsourcing is canvassed is encouraged. I know that many facility managers probably don't want to outsource because they feel competition from the outsource company. They feel pressure that they may lose relevance and so on and so forth. But think about the positive side again. After we have seen those other things about the reason to insource and keep your services within, why should you outsource? Sometimes to reduce headcount. Many organizations don't want to have too many people on their payroll because of the compliance issues that relate to payroll management or HR management. And then costs. This may sound like, why should I outsource to reduce costs? After all, the contractor is going to put in his own profits, and that profit is going to be a drain on my own resources. That's not always the case, ladies and gentlemen. The contractors who are specialists in the field that you are sourcing a job to them usually usually are experts in that area. They know how to source for labor, they know how to source for materials and supplies at prices you, the in-house FM, cannot even get. So even if they have cut the total cost you were spending, they will also be able to make their handsome profit in the process. Okay, so yes, it's possible for you to actually save money by outsourcing, even though there's going to be a middleman of profits taken at that point. And then for many organizations, the need is for you to focus on your core business. A bank, an insurance company, a hospital, a restaurant, so many organizations today need to really focus on their operations and give facility management and all of those support services to experts in this field. The important thing is to have an alignment between the strategy of the organization and the strategy of the FM service provider, okay? And then you are also buying in the provider's core business, because that's a core business for that provider. You are taking advantage of that provider being in his own space to give you the kind of services that gives you peace of mind while you focus on your core business. Acquire expertise not available in-house. When you employ contractors to work for you, you learn a lot. Some of them come in with skills, best practices they've applied elsewhere. And within a short while of engaging with them and relating with them, you learn a lot from contractors. So don't see them as adversaries, because you're acquiring expertise that you probably didn't have. Access to that expertise. So there are staff that they will deploy to you that will work for you as if they are your staff. And these are people that you probably didn't know existed in terms of the skills they have or how to acquire them. You'll probably be struggling with getting somebody who's not trained in a particular area to become effective in that area, right? Whereas there are people who are experts in that area. And so the FM companies, service providers, they have a way of finding them and deploying them to you. So you have access to skills and expertise that you will not otherwise be able to source by yourself. And some of the things I've mentioned before, flexibility, whether resources or cost flexibility. If you outsource, you can easily tap into this opportunity to scale down, scale up, at will, at shorter notice that you can do if you have everything happening for you in-house. Improve career opportunities for FM staff. In most organizations, the facility management staff has a point where, that's it for you, right? Historically, people just get to that point and plateau, and then they either retire or leave the organization for other opportunities, right? But if you're in an FM company, you can actually rise and rise and rise to ED. You can rise because that's your core. You are in facility management and you now understand business and you're rising in that core, okay? And then access to investments or systems that would require capital that cannot be justified in the host organization. You want to service air conditioners. If I have to buy my own man lift or mechanical transportation device to carry my staff up and down every time we have to service the outdoor units, and every 3 months I bring it out to you, that's an unnecessary expense for me, right? But if a service provider uses it on my site, they can take it to another site and use and again and again and again and make the return on investment is nice, so reasonable for systems that I use every now and then. So I don't need to buy everything because I have outsourced. Free up management time to focus on strategic issues and planning. Back again to looking at how outsourcing helps you to focus on your core business. But you can't just outsource. You can't just wish away your problem, because this is what's often happening in the industry. People just think that once you call FM companies together and say, we're outsourcing, just come and take a look at my properties and just decide what kind of services that we need, decide what scope of service that we need, set up your service level agreements. And you see FM companies just running helter-skelter, trying to conjure up documentation to go and send such a bid. That client is not ready for FM outsourcing yet. And if you're the internal FM of that organization, please do a proper job. And that's why we're teaching this. If you don't know what to do, even after learning this, you're still not able to advise your organization to get a consultant in to help set the stage for outsourcing. You start by defining the objectives and key attributes of services required. It doesn't make sense to say, I don't know what kind of services, you are the expert, tell me what kind of services you offer in FM. You're just trying to waste my time, all right? What are the current arrangements? What are the key stakeholders? What are they trying to achieve? So even if you don't know exactly what they will need, you must be able to describe your organization, describe your objectives, describe key attributes of service, that they have enjoyed in the past. So I get a sense of what I should prepare and package for you. And then adequate documentation. There are so many documentations that many organizations don't have and they're trying to outsource. For example, I need to know the quantities, dimensions, positions or locations of all your assets, as well as their specifications, model numbers, capacities, and so on. Because I'm going to create a plan, right? A generator that takes 25 liters of oil to service, and another generator that takes 70 liters of oil to service, they are not in the same category. You can't just tell me there's a generator, and then that's enough. No, you must document your asset. You must fully understand the asset you are trying to outsource its management. Identification of special demands. So any unique service needs to be identified. High priority services and risk assessment of those areas. So the critical things. So when you are bidding for such a job, or you're bidding it out, for example, you are telling them what is critical so they can focus well. Consideration of flexibility and variability in demands, of course. If there are seasonal variations in how you demand facility services, you need to indicate that. And the management implications, the kind of actions that will lead to certain reaction within your organization as the buying organization. If there are priorities from senior management, the vendors must know that documentation must take place. So there's a lot of policies and procedures and values and all kinds of things that we know that, or we should know that we have and that we live by. If I'm going to get contractors to come and work in my space, I must put all of those considerations into the documentation. So they are not coming there to either come and mess up and corrupt my culture or feign ignorance of what the culture should be. There must be a way of getting my vendors properly informed before they even start bidding. There are some jobs you will see and you don't even want to work in that environment. You don't want to work there because you already know that you will not be able to fit in to that environment because they are strict in certain areas. This is what they expect. Appropriate bid evaluation criteria, soft and hard measures, and comparison of all costs, not just the lowest price. If lowest price is your main consideration and you have done all the technical evaluations, that is fine. That is fine. Whatever you are going to be using as country's consideration for selecting who your winning bid should be developed well in advance. It's called seeing the end from the beginning, right? So if 5 of you are going to bid for this job, you should already know before you start bidding what we are going to be considering. There are some bid publications I will read through. As soon as I finish reading it, I shut my mind off. I'm not qualified to apply for this one. It's straightforward. They have been very clear on their bid evaluation criteria. Why would I want to, force my way into a bid when there was one once where the client asked that all bidders must submit their bank statements that shows that they have had turnovers of over $1 billion. I didn't just bother. I just blinked, flip that page, and I continue with my business because that is not for me. I'm not at that level where I will now go and bring a bank statement that has $1 billion as evidence. I don't know why they add such things in bids, anyway, but that's exactly what I saw there, right? So, and then when you don't itemize what we use to evaluate, and then people now submit bids to you, that's why you now start conjuring reasons why it must be A and not C. That's a criminal process, and that should be avoided. Let's take a look at the procurement process itself. A need is something you want to provide for, solve, resolve, or make available. So it could be a problem that needs to be resolved or solved. It could be an opportunity that needs to be taken advantage of. It could be something that is in schedule that needs to take place. So your preventive maintenance plan, for example, is already in place. There are activities that will be performed at certain intervals. Something breaks and another problem is going to raise ugly head and you need to take action to fix it. All of this can be sources of needs, which means they can come from your supervisors or managers, they can come from your building users, they can come from your own plans. At the end of the day, somebody identifies the need, and this person is a facility manager. Whenever he gets these issues or whether it's his own plan, he needs to define what that need is so that we can now begin to ask ourselves, what is the next step? What are the requests that should go out? I want to get procurement to help me acquire ABC, but then I have done my own need identification, need assessment, scope of work, and I now know exactly what I want to acquire. So I prepare the request, and then I finalize the request and submit to procurement. This is where procurement steps in, right? Now, preparing the request before you get to procurement includes identifying the problem, scoping the problem, doing an in-house estimate, doing a bid selection, bidder selection criteria, and the bid evaluation criteria. I've actually done the whole work. By the time I get it to the procurement guys, they are just like clerks, moving around with my errand. All the checklists for which they're going to select vendors and select how to decide which product or service meets my needs, I've already spelled out before I gave to them. So procurement is largely done by the facility management team. Procurement guys are just errand people who help to take that instruction and go and implement it. So they review the request, they come up with a draft contract. Of course, bigger gets involved. Why do you have to have a draft contract? Because you want the bidders to get a sense of not just the scope and specifications, but every other condition that is going to bind them if they sign this contract, right? So that is added to that scope, bidders criteria, that bid evaluation, evaluation criteria, and so on. And then bidders are looked for. Look at the market, get information on the right bidders. You make a short list. You send them the bid. They submit their bids. You evaluate the bid. At the point of evaluation of bids is not when you start deciding what criteria you're going to use to evaluate the bid, or start using subjective terms like, oh, these people are very good, but they did a certain job that wasn't customer was not well satisfied with. Should we give them a job or not? Or on account of that, we should. Those are all subjective things that come at the end of the day. You must have identified all of them at the point of preparing the request, which is an FM function. When you get to evaluate bids, procurement already have a checklist with which they're going to evaluate the bids. They prepare contracts, which legal will probably get involved again, and then the contract is executed. So you as a facility manager becomes someone that is part, in fact, you're the one that runs the whole process to get the desired end results that will give you the best results or the best procurement possible. Now, I hear people say things like, oh, procurement did this, they did that, they didn't carry us along, they just go and pick their own vendor and look at what they have not provided, the thing is not working, it's bad. We see all kinds of, things like that, but the truth is we have abdicated. If all you sent was a 2-line email, dear procurement, kindly help us procure 2 horsepower ACs for the boardroom, then you have failed completely as a facility manager. Because what it means to procure a 2 horsepower AC or a series of 2 horsepower ACs for the boardroom is, first, what is the boardroom? What's the objective? 2, why do we need cooling the boardroom? 3, what kind of cooling do we need? What are the options we've considered? This is how we narrowed it down. And that is the point at which you create that little SAP to say, this is the specification of the AC we want. That's the one you want to sell the procurement. That specification. This is the size, this is the space it's going to fit in, this is the size of AC we want, not more than this, not less than that. This is the noise level we can cope with, this is the kilowatt hour rating, this is the vibration level that you can cope with, this is the power factor we can live with, or the electricity dimension in terms of watts, kilowatts, amps, and the rest, right? So you have done all of that In fact, by the time you get to procurement to finalize the request and submit it to, by the time you get to the point where you finalize the request and submit to procurement, you have already created a straight jacket with which they will deliver exactly what you want. They just make a checklist out of your prescription. So for air conditioning, for example, you probably need to make like some 15-line item descriptions with metrics that tells you the range we're looking for. You cannot order for 2 horsepower AC and receive 3 horsepower AC and be happy. No, it's not more or bigger is better. It's what I want that I want, because this one will be a nuisance for me. Procurement lives by the rules you create if you decide to create the rule yourself. And one of the things we do in FM is have a contractor database. We do a pre-tender qualification, or what we call a pre-qualification exercise. We make a list of various competencies, technical ability, and financial stability that the contractor must comply with as a minimum requirement to even cross the line to be asked to bid for our jobs, right? So some of these lists, legal identity of the organization, whether it's limited liability or business name, company ownership, supplier financial strength. One of the ones that said, I must show a bank statement of 1 billion, it's probably looking at financial strength. They want sales provider to have a lot of money to serve them and be paid later, right? So if your business model fits that style, then of course you have to have a strong financial strength. In some cases, they'll give you the opportunity of taking a loan from the bank to show that the bank is willing to support you, even if it's a letter that guarantees that you have funding to implement any job they award to you. And then, of course, insurance cover, technical competencies, that is shown through client reference, number of contract and staff resources, subcontracting that you do, to know whether you usually have the expertise or you're just latching onto your subcontractors, safety record, insurance claim, education record, and so on and so forth. This gives insight into the kind of organizations you are trying to engage with, so that you're not surprised tomorrow if you've connected with a company and they're not becoming problematic. So it's helpful to have a list of contractors to work with. But again, don't forget that there are also limitations, right? Because if contractors are too few bidding for your job, you may be frustrated greatly. So let's be conscious of that suppliers list. So we can democratize the process, always having more so you can select and be completely random in your approach to who does the job. And then also helps you gain experience with those who are very good, so you can isolate them to one side and use them more often for a particular type of job that they are already established their preference for, okay? And then of course, when you do a shortlist, you do invitation to tender, you give a package of information. You put templates and forms in it so that they can fill their information or their proposal for you, and then they submit to you. Procurement is a process of selection of who eventually do the job. In many cases, the bid selection criteria often dovetails to money. Who is the cheapest, right? We call that the lowest responsive bid. It's most straightforward based on the lowest bidder who can meet the specified requirements. So in essence, you've done a small checklist and disqualified others that cannot do the job, right? And you now know those that can meet the specification. You get them to put in their prices. When they put in their price, you go for the lowest. Okay? Things that are straightforward, that you understand the cost drivers and the patterns, are good for lowest responsive bid. I just look at it, this person has won, award him the job, okay? And then evaluated best value for money bid is based on evaluation of technical criteria as well as bid price. Vendors are rated against a floor, right? So what this means is that it's like mixing up technical and commercial, such that there is a percentage score for each of the criteria. So you could be the lowest bidder, but lowest bidder or cost consideration may just be 20% of my evaluation. Your recent experience in delivering something similar might be 50% in my evaluation. So if you come out tops in a criteria that I've given a weight of 50%, right? That means you already have 40 or 45% on your side for that criteria that's most important to me now. By the time I get to the price section and someone outbids you on the price, you are both actually using price to fight for 20% of the bid selection criteria. You may end up with just 5 out of 20, and the other person got 20 over 20. If you add up your score versus what that person's scored, the final decision will no longer be done based on who had the lowest bid, because I've given cost a bid valuation weight that is less than recent experience, or that is less than risk management plan, or that is less than, there are so many factors for different kinds of jobs. And then you now have the unique service, the final contract price and terms negotiated after the selection. For items that you don't have too much of options, that you just select a few vendors and allow them to submit a bid, or you are having to deal with OEM reps, original equipment manufacturers, their representatives, who are almost monopolies, especially if it's just one, or two that you have for that particular function in the country, right? So let's look at contracts. We defined procurement as a process for arriving at contracts for purchasing. Contract is a tool that defines the terms of relationships and interactions involved in the procurement of products or services from external providers. It helps to ensure regulatory compliance, reputational risk management, and effective change control. So in essence, if I were to connect the two, I would say procurement leads to a contract, or contract is the end product of a procurement process, okay? Where all of the analysis and documentation that we've done in the procurement process is encapsulated. That's now the final documentation that summarizes all we have done in that procurement process and produces the agreement that we've reached. For a contract to be valid, there must be mutual agreement, which means there must be meeting of minds, and whether that meeting of minds is expressed or implied. What this means is that you could have two parties write down that they have agreed, they understand each other. That's express. You may have, we did not write down anything, but our behaviors towards each other was a way of granting consent. Okay, so if somebody comes into your workspace or your home and starts working for you, and you just keep saying thank you, thank you, thank you, and you do not stop him or have any discussion, it doesn't mean that you have not gone into a contract with the person. The person works for you, and the person begins to ask for a reward or a payment, you owe already, all right? So that's implied, so you cannot run away from that reality. There must be consideration, which means there must be an exchange of something of value. It's called the principle of quid pro quo. Then there must be competent parties. Whoever signs must have legal authority and capacity to understand the terms. That's why in law, minors and people with mental incapacity and people without the appropriate authority when they act on behalf of an entity is not valid. In fact, in case of minors and people with impaired capacity, mental capacity, they can't even agree with you on anything or sign papers for you that will be valid about themselves, let alone about any other entity. And that's why negotiating and signing contracts in bars where there's so much drink and booze around might be a challenge, because someone can, use a photograph of booze around an agreement to disqualify and say he wasn't competent at that time because he had been drunk, so he signed it in error. and that agreement will become invalid immediately, and that's dangerous. There must be a proper subject matter, which means that there must be a lawful purpose for that contract. So if you have an illegal transaction or illegal activity and you have an agreement regarding that illegal activity, it is not a valid contract, okay? It's not a valid contract. So two parties agree on how to share the loot from a robbery or from a corrupt practice. That agreement is not a valid contract. There must also be mutual right to remedy, which means that most parties must have an equal right to remedy a breach of the terms by the other party. A contract is not going to be valid if I don't have any means in the contract to be able to seek redress. Okay, so that must be built in. And then there must be an agreement to enter into the contract. The parties demonstrate that negotiations have ended and agreement has been reached when the contract is signed. So if you are still in negotiation, you have things you can do. Keep saying subject to contract or subject to issuing of PO. We are still in negotiation. No contract is, is implied, and so on and so forth. You have to put certain words in that exchange process just to ensure that somebody does not misinterpret and goes to deliver. Because if that happens, you might have a case of implied contracts, and you may struggle to wriggle out of it. For facility management contracts, we have quite a number of types of contracts. We have the fixed price contracts, where the scope of work is very clear, the cost of the unit rates and the cost build-up is very clear. There's usually a spreadsheet, and everybody understands the specification of every line item. For those kind of contracts, you see them say things, we understand clearly this cost is fixed and this is how that service will be delivered. There's a common aspect of the FM contract that is fixed price. Things that have to do with salaries, routine activities that have been agreed to, specification and service levels have been set. This is the rate we are bidding for it, and those are fixed price items, right? They can just be made a separate contract on their own, right? And they have the cost reimbursement. Cost reimbursement are items that are not easily estimated. Specifications are there, but not very clear. There's no precision as to what that real cost or market price will be. Clearly, when you have variations like inflationary tendencies and trends, and clients can say, you know what, we are going to provide, we're going to accept you providing this service at market price plus a certain markup or certain percentage, right? So that way, we're doing price intelligence on an ongoing basis. And when I request for anything, it is delivered at the market price plus a markup. So in the cost reimbursement, the contractor says, this is the price I'm selling to you, all right? Tie that to the open book 2 and 5, right? In the open book, the contractor brings an invoice to say, this is the price in the market. My own fee for helping you get this is this amount. That fee could be a percentage, could be a sum agreed to, maybe for time in the period or what the agreements have been. Number 3 is the indefinite delivery quantity line item, IDQLI. This is a contract we normally will refer to as a schedule of rates, or a price list, or a purchasing catalog contract, where rates for materials, rates for labor are identified, and then we are not having an amount as a contract amount. The contract amount is open such that as we order from you on an ongoing basis, we pull rates from that schedule of rates to invoice us, and we pay you. Even if there's no contract sum, there is a ceiling which is tied to our budget. So if I have an air conditioning maintenance contract in place, that air conditioning maintenance contract can be tied to the air conditioning maintenance budget line item and say, this contract is not going to exceed 5 million a year, right? And then once that is signed, it does not mean the contractor is entitled to 5 million that year. No, if I don't order any reactive work from that contractor, there's nothing to to pay for, right? So in the IDQLI approach, it removes that problem of negotiating every time. Oh, go and bring your quote. Oh, go and bring your quote. Let's negotiate. No. It's completely removed, because at the end of the day, you really want to be stable. You want speed in delivery, right? But the front end work of accumulating all of those material schedule, doing market survey, and then hedging against inflation by making sure that those rates are valid for a certain fixed determined period, and the revision is done again at the end of that period. You have the national buy contract. It could be a fixed price, could be cost reimbursable, could be IDQLI, it could be open book. It only means that contracts are made start from one point, and delivery is at many points. So if you have a bank headquarters, or an organization that has multiple branches, for example, any contract given to one vendor to supply services or goods across multiple locations and be invoiced at one point, all you need to do is get a job completion certificate signed off at that point where the offer of the job was requested, bring it to the central point where the contract is being administered. You are running a national buy contract. And the last item, the labor hour, time and materials, is a contract that is mostly used to pay for professional services. Consultants, architects, facility management consultants, engineering consultants, who will bill you for billable hours for specific technical, jobs that they want to deliver to you, and they'll be for time and materials as well. Let's talk about a few contract negotiation guidelines. Know when you need a signed paper and when you don't. Some contracts have a level of risk that means that you must put pen to paper. You must have a contract in place. Okay. For some, you've evaluated the risk and there's no need for a pen to paper. You can agree and run. Okay. So many of us get into contracts every day just by talking. Agree. Okay. Yes, we'll meet at so and so place. So we'll do this. We'll bring so amount. I'll bring so amount. We'll make this. These are all agreements. You don't need to put them on paper, right? But experience has shown that when you can analyze the risk that something some objective may not be met, some side effect that could be negative can come to haunt the organization or the parties, that you need to, go and document. Know what you are worth before negotiation starts, and this is mostly for the FM companies. You want to win a job, or even for a person trying to get hired. If you're not sure of what baseline you can deal with, you could go into negotiation confused, and you could be taken in. For example, you could feel you're very happy when an offer is made, only to find out that whoever negotiated with you should change you later, and all of a sudden you are depressed. Research the client before you begin negotiating with them. Not all clients are your clients, to be real. Not all. You need to know, which ones you can actually take their words, home and trust. Okay. Some can tell you, we'll pay you at the end of every month, or give you this and do that and do that. And there's a history around them that they never do, right? And you have to ask yourself if you want to join the other pack of people complaining, or you just want to move on and do your business elsewhere. You can negotiate more than just money. In fact, negotiate everything else before negotiating money, especially service levels and service specifications. So your scope of work needs to be agreed to, specification needs to be agreed to, service levels needs to be agreed to before you start talking about money. Because every time you finish talking about money before looking at the scope of work, the service specification, and the service levels, then you have made a huge mistake, because you always have to go back to revise the money negotiation whenever you make a change on any of the parameters I just looked at. And then be reasonable. Be reasonable means that you should always look for a win-win approach to negotiation. Let it not be so hard that anyone that negotiates with you are always going into losses. Things you cannot get by yourself at certain rates. Why are you trying to negotiate for a contract who's going to spend his own money going to get it for you, not to make anything on top? Sometimes you need to be reasonable as a service buyer. listen to the potential client's needs. And this goes again to service providers. A client can tell you, I need light, or I need AC, or I need, that's what they told you they want, or that's what they told you they need. But it may not be what they need. It may not be what they need. It is possible that there are other ways to meet their real need than what they ask you for. If you provide exactly what the client tells you and it doesn't meet the client's need, the client will also hold you accountable or see you as part of his problem. But if you drill down to understand the real need of the client and you provide options, of course, you don't decide for the client, you don't dictate for the client, but you provide options because you know. Even when you finally arrive at a particular option, you know exactly how to deliver it to continuously meet the needs of the client. Communicate with care and guard your emotions. There's no position for emotions in business, all right? Keep emotions away and don't talk down on people. Don't be arrogant, don't be rude. Many people have, in the course of negotiations and contract expiration on behalf of companies that they don't even own, destroyed their career. They will carry it to a level where they become personal, they start becoming insultive and abusive. And then at the end of the day, the person they are negotiating with see them as a very, very bad or poisonous personality. Even the organization they think they are doing that for will end up, not valuing them because they have not done anything good when they have to kill customer relationship in the name of being hard. Okay. Don't be afraid to negotiate, don't rush it, and not always winning and the other party losing, okay? One thing that you need to watch out for seriously in your contracts is variations. Whenever you put a contract in place, make sure that you have done due diligence, you've considered everything carefully before you pen that contract. Because every time there's a variation, it means that you've not done your due diligence, all right? Now, but putting there shall be no variation in a contract doesn't actually make sense because most of the time you, the service buyer, will still be the one to come and ask for certain variations. If a delivery that is supposed to be delivered on Monday, you call the vendor to say, please don't bring it on Monday. We've not prepared the space where we're going to store them. Bring it on Tuesday. That already is a variation. So that may be coming from you. But when you now write, there will be no variation allowed, it's as if you are taking a variation only in terms of money. Variation is in terms of everything, the service scope, the service level, the service specification, as well as the funds that go or the payment that go into that contract. When you have vendors on site working for you, do you stick around and do a minute by minute, second by second supervision to the point where they feel stifled and micromanaged? Do you stay away and allow them to just do whatever they like and produce the kind of results that they feel? These are two ends of the spectrum. However, you want to manage communication, supervision, monitoring, and progress analysis for any contractor, you must document that well in advance of the contract being put in place. What does this mean? The reporting templates needs to be known. Frequency of reports needs to be known. Audit templates need to be known. The evaluation criteria of performance, key performance indicators, and service level agreements need to be laid out up front. You don't wake up tomorrow and say, we're going to start having a client briefing meeting every morning. No, you should have specified that then, because this is going to require manpower, man hours to set up and, come and brief you on a daily basis, right? You cannot just wake up and create that into a contract that's already existing. If you want to make changes, you go back and do a variation on the contract. The vendor has a say in how that change is going to be implemented. Same goes with costs. Budgets are a big success or performance measure for facility managers, right? So you cannot just commit your organization randomly. You have to monitor how the commitment you have made is lining up with the budget you have, right? And ensure that there is enough funds for your committed services. It's possible that you put a highly QLI contract of 10 million in place, and your organization is no longer able to fund up to 10 million for that particular line item. Don't just keep drawing on that service and hoping that some magic will happen and that vendor will eventually get paid. I've seen situations where companies cannot pay certain vendors and the vendors lose that money perpetually. And the FM is the one that made that commitment. I have been in situations where I have been made to pay when the organization is not going to be able to deliver on the service. Somebody pushes, I make payment, and then the next thing they come back and give me a story of a variation. Of course, they want to play pranks with the refunds and things like that. So let's be very careful of how we commit organizations to serve us when we don't have the funds. It's actually criminal to do that. All right, and then every contract needs to be evaluated. Just like all the inspection, all the reporting, all the audit forms and evaluation criteria, you also need to put a performance management system inside the contract. How often are we going to do this evaluation? What kind of criteria are we going to measure? You know, what kind of feedback are we going to have, and so on and so forth. All right. If you have not carefully established your performance measures, you cannot be evaluating a contractor. I've seen situations where FMs will just sit down together and say, this contractor, they come late, scores 0, they just create one criteria and score at 0. These ones, they spend too much money here, you start scoring and creating red everywhere. No, it's very wrong. You must have predetermined and pre-agreed how that will be specified before you can use those criteria. Contracts can be specified as input or outputs, all right? The input specification is where the client set out in detail the exact services to be performed by the contractor in a prescriptive fashion. How it will be done, what will be done, when it will be done, how it will be done, who will do it, you know, everything is spelled out by the client. That's an input specification or prescriptive specification. In the case of the output specification, you are telling the contractor what you want to receive as value or utility from the service, which means you are setting the standards. If you set the standards, let the contractor decide how he's going to solve his problem, deliver the service to meet your standard. So if I take a cleaning example, as a case in point, if I give an input specification, I'll determine how many cleaners, when they will clean, what tools they will use, what chemicals they will use, when they will clean, you know, and so I will decide all that, and I will pay based on how cleaners show up at work and how they follow the rosters and charts to deliver their job, right? But if I'm doing an output specification, I'm not looking at the side. I'll look at my own property. I have 6 square meters of floor. It's granite floor. I have a glass on my walls, on my windows, on so and so spaces. These are the square meters of glass. I have toilets, they're porcelain toilets, they're this specification. I'll detail all my assets that requires cleaning. I'll take each one by one and specify how I want to see it. For example, I don't want to have streaks and stains on my toilet bowls, right? I don't want to have dust or on the wall, on the floor. I don't want to have cobwebs on the walls. I want the table to be impeccably clean, that it will not stain shirts or stain hands, and so on and so forth. I'm doing all of this and I'm specifying exactly how I'm going to check it. I'm going to do a white handkerchief test at so time, so intervals. I'm specifying what I want. You figure out how to deliver it, okay? Then of course, those are the service specifications. So if I were to break down the 3 key components for describing a service, the scope of work. The scope of work is a description of what will be done, how it will be done. All right, so take landscaping, for example, you know, the mowing, the mulching, the manure application, the trimming of hedges and shrubs. I'll spell all of those out as my scope of work, right? Now, after I've done that, I will now provide specification. In developing specification, I'm going to provide more details on how the scope of work will be implemented. Now, in providing more details on how the scope of work will be implemented, for example, the quality of workers that can do the job, certifications they must have, processes that I insist on. I'm providing further guidelines on how the scope will be implemented. So that's my specification for that job, right? And then I now go to the service level. In the service level section of that description, I am creating certain efficiency and effectiveness targets that must be met as part of the delivery of this service. All right, so things like time targets for change out of certain things like availability targets, if you are managing air conditioning, power plants, or water provision critical systems, you know, things like customer complaints, reworks, you know, I'll create some of these things as metrics that I can measure. So while the scope of work and the service specification describing what to be done and how it to be done and all of that, the service level are metrics that helps me measure how scope of work and the service specification are being applied. Okay, so that's how these three items relate to themselves. And then contracts means money is changing hands. The agreement is set up so that money can change hands and goods and services can be delivered. But there are all kinds of situations that can lead to fraud in contracts. People do all kinds of things just to make an extra buck. And so they manipulate even a well thought out procurement process to make a gain for themselves. This is fraud. Anytime somebody performs any intentional deception to gain an advantage or damage an individual entity, any kind of illegal acts of deceit and concealment and violation to obtain money, property, or services, avoid payments or loss of services, secure personal or business advantage is a fraud. And fraud can be fraud of collusion, where people exchange information within a certain small group, share information they should not have shared to a certain person so that they can get an advantage. Price fixing is when some vendors on their own begin to regulate illegally price ceilings, and that affects non-competitive pricing as well. Okay, so where the lowest bid is not a competitive bid because all the others are bidded higher deliberately to allow that lowest bid win. Irregularities during execution, when you won the bid, you are executing it and you're throwing up all kinds of variation that should have been anticipated or captured before the contract was delivered, or people trying to overpay in terms of percentage of work done. All kinds of scams take place in there. Payment for work not carried out and forming of cartel among suppliers. To mitigate this, the FM team and the procurement team needs to segregate duties. There should be no one particular person who is running the whole procurement process. There should be people who are handling different aspects of it. So there will be more transparency and there will be more, of course, you expect that with more people, there will be less collusion. Shifting of staff, even when you have done segregation of duties, some staff should also rotate around different duties intermittently. The proper authorization, certain people in the organization should have authorization to approve certain actions. For example, variation is highly abused. You award a contract of 4 million, And then variations are coming for 13 million and 12 million, which means you have bypassed the procurement process for that job. You've just upturned the authorization process. If it was 4 million, you can approve it. That's the process. But now, you know that at 13 million or 14 million, you cannot approve it. You have to go through a more stringent process. So you overlook everything and it creates a 4 million contract, and then you drive into the middle and then you say, oh, we are stuck. Unless another 13 million item is solved, we cannot make progress. Okay. And then when the bidding is competitive and transparent, you have taken care of fraud. In fact, some organizations will not even allow two vendors meet themselves on site, let alone get to know who else is bidding. So it's fully competitive and you're doing it blindly. So you don't have to meet and agree who should win. Documentation and record keeping. This is also for protection of every party, so that somebody cannot wake up tomorrow and say, because you bought a new car, you were part of that bidding process, you've taken a bribe, right? So document everything so you can be sure that you are covered. And then change order, back to that variation issues, and budgetary control. You cannot set up contracts that will not, that will now become an issue for the organization to pay for. During contract implementation, there will be disputes. No matter how carefully you wrote the service level agreement specifications, and scope, there will, some disputes might still arise to clarify information, even disputes around certain variations, disputes around expectations that are not being met, and so on and so forth. Building a common alternative dispute resolution technique into the contract, ADR. We can have a management escalation where senior management of both parties just meet to iron out things. It's informal, it's straightforward, relationship matters to those people, and instead of fighting and destroying things at the bottom, just refer the bosses to have a discussion. And this is very powerful. This is very powerful because sometimes people at the shop floor might have made a mistake, right? One party and the other party is trying to cover his own ass, for example, and trying to defend a wrong position. When two managers or two directors meet, it's often easy to see how to iron things out. And for some of them, it's a history, it's a relationship thing. Then you can go for mediation, which is a more formal. Both parties agree to reach a voluntary settlement with the help of a skilled facilitator. Usually this skilled facilitator is an industry expert, somebody in the industry who can look at both sides, who can draw on experience and draw on certain other precedents within the industry and make a judgment, right? It may be binding or it may not. Both parties have to be the ones to agree whether it's binding or not. And then the third ADR is arbitration, where you submit to an impartial person to look at and give a final decision. Arbitration is often quasi-legal, which means the courts respect arbitration's outcomes. And so once you get to arbitration and you reach an agreement and you refuse to accept, for example, and you take it to court, in more than 90% of the cases, the judges will look at the arbitrator's analysis and simply just, back it up with the judgment. And so that's how those works. Every contract must be closed out. There are so many of us that have contracts that have been put in place. The contract's ceiling has been exhausted. The contract has expired because it's supposed to expire at certain dates, or for some reasons, the contract was no longer implemented. And we never took out time to close the contract. That contract can become a living activity anytime in the future and can become a nuisance. So let's be careful to have a checklist that both parties agree that line items have been checked out, and we both agree that this contract should be closed. So everything that that makes a commitment on the contract, you pick out those items that are commitment from both parties and you put them in this checklist, and then tick and sign against line items to say we've actually fulfilled this contract. Or even if there are items that could not be fulfilled, we'll make a note that it was not fulfilled and we're happy to close the contract without it. That's exactly how contracts are closed. Without that documentation, that contract is not closed. It remains open. Okay, and that is not safe. All right, so that's our lesson for today. We have an assessment with this one. We expect it to be turned in. And please, this applies to both the weekend Saturday class and the online virtual groups, because there's not going to be a Saturday physical class this week. We cannot defer submission of these assignments or assessments for 2 weeks, even though we're going to still have this class physically. Please, the information should go around to the group that everybody needs to work on this assessment and turn them in as quickly as possible. All right, thank you so much. Let me hear your questions as I see you pop up your hand after looking at your notes. Yeah, Moses. Moses, please go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Everyone, thank you for the lecture so far. I want to dwell on the variation really. I want to ask what's the best way of dealing with the variation. You know, I'm thinking, do we now in a contract, do we now make it an open-ended, or how do we now, you know, work around the variation, knowing that things might happen even after signing the contract, just like you explained in today's lecture. There may be a demand from the clients that probably in times of delivery, changing the time of delivery and all and so on, and maybe from the supplier also, probably they are not able to meet up with time, and they may want to change the timing. So how best can one deal with the variation in the contract?
There is a whole section that needs to be in the contract called the MOC, the Management of Change. It's a clause. All right. That clause will envisage the kind of scenarios and circumstances that can lead to change.
Okay.
Spell out the process for initiating the change. Indicates analysis that needs to be done regarding each change request, and list the approvals that must be gotten for that change to be effected.
Okay.
Yeah, so once you build that into your contract, in fact, it actually makes people very careful to pop up change requests unnecessarily, because you might find a very minor obstacle that you can figure out how to resolve, and then all of a sudden you are trying to make a change request because there's no process for managing change. You just know that if I just send an email or just make a call, I can push through a change. But if somebody refers you to an MOC section in the contract and you see what you must document to request for the change, the kind of analysis that must be done, impact of that change on this and that that must be shown, and the approvals that must be gotten for that change to be implemented, you go and find a solution for your problem.
Okay. Okay.
You're welcome. Benjamin.
Thank you very much.
Benjamin.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, class.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so I just want to share a little experience on one of the contracts. Now, first and foremost, this has to go to look into how the draft contract in terms of putting some legal terms to the contract to bind.
The network is bad. We can't actually hear anything.
Yeah, Benjamin, your network is really impeding your audio is not coming through at all. Benjamin, maybe you should change your internet source and see if you can get through. Let's hear from Michael, please.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mr. Paul.
Welcome.
So I want your, I would like your opinion on, a scenario that I want to paint. What's your opinion on a situation where a company is owing contractors or vendors, who have done certain jobs, even after contracts have been signed, and maybe in situations where the contractors have completed the job, the MDQAs have been signed. That's the MDQA, Material Delivery Quality Assurance, to say that the job has been done. And in a situation where you have maybe 5 vendors of a particular kind of, maybe, let me put it like electrical items, and all those 5 vendors are being owed, and the facility manager is still expected to deliver on maybe client expectations. I just want your opinion on, what to do in such situation, beyond just letting management know that, let them know the impact of what the, owing those contractors are. Because, apart from not being able to get materials when we need them, the company reputation is on the line. The vendors are now, they now know the company as a company that doesn't pay on time. Maybe a contract that is supposed to state for maybe payment of 60 days or 30 days or 45 days. You see the company owing for upwards of 6 months. At some point, it becomes embarrassing. So as an FM, obviously you are loyal to your company, the one that employed you. Or how do you navigate it in such a way that you don't get to a point where you are accused of fraud, maybe supporting the contractor, if you understand what I mean?
Okay. First and foremost, don't get into a contract or a commitment to a vendor without first getting a commitment from your company that there's funds to pay for it. Sometimes FM departments don't have adequate budgeting system that controls how funds are pre-approved before the expenses are committed to. In some cases, the FM department has a budget, but the cash flow at the time of that exigent need shows that in reality, the company cannot afford to get that job done. But in an anxious move to get your job executed, you end up committing contractors without getting firm commitments from your company that these vendors will be paid. So if I'm getting approval from a boss to commit, say, 1 million naira, this vendor is going to do this job for 1 million. And this job is going to be done in the month of March. So, and the vendor needs to be paid in April. I also need a commitment that 1 million naira will be available to pay the vendor in April. And once I'm able to get that, I need also to be an advocate for the vendor within my organization, in the sense that the vendor has provided the value and we are committed. I'm being an advocate to the vendor. The way I communicate my advocacy for the vendor is not pitching the vendor against the company. I am being an advocate for the vendor, protecting the reputation of the organization, creating loyalty amongst my vendors to the organization, who will always be committed because we meet our own commitments. So I will rebrand my advocacy on behalf of the vendor as something my company needs. Okay, so that's, we can have several steps we can take, but to be honest, there are all kinds of companies out there, and that you really can do your best when it comes to ensuring that they meet their commitments to vendor. In fact, there was one particular case where I worked with the company. They did all they did to 3 or 4 diesel suppliers, and the diesel suppliers refused to, respond to them. When I got so frustrated with the past history and I couldn't get suppliers to give. I found new suppliers, and the new supplier, after supplying, learned that this company I work for will not pay on time. They dragged and dragged and dragged. We started defaulting for almost, no matter what I did, we're defaulting for almost a month. And then we got stuck again, and the client wants us to supply power, right? And we had to get a vendor to. So this particular vendor just said, you know what, please pay me my last money so that I can use it to get a new supply and send to you. And then as soon as his money was paid, he bailed. So it was a test of integrity for that organization. Sometimes it's a big issue. The company is owing several vendors, doesn't want to pay them, but has the cash to go and buy from the filling station or to bypass those vendors and buy from someone else who was not listed with them. And this news gets around. Reputation precedes our organizations. And many organizations have gone bust because of this. But my caution to FMs is, don't be the one that made the commitments when you know there's an uncertainty around that payment. I know you could be pushed. Sometimes it gets to very, very unethical practices. You don't have to be in a job where integrity is completely lacking, okay?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Innocent.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening, class. I want to say thank you for the lectures, procurement and contract management. Issues usually arise from these, especially ranging from different aspects, actually. From my little experience and from little accounts I've had, I want to ask, is it usually best to consider low-cost bids as better options to scope? Because, for instance, we have facility managers here that we are in a class, so many persons have gained experience, so many are yet to actually gain experience. You have contracts with you in your hand, you want to bid with contractors. You say, okay, this is cheaper, without even trying to look at the scope to know whether or not what the scope entails. As much as you see the headline and it's cheaper to what other persons have, other bids you've received, you just take it as, yes, this is it. That is one. There's another question, so I would like you to throw light in. There are instances where we don't look at acceptance criteria. You talked about it when you talked about output specifications. Yes, what we expect back from jobs. Otherwise, we give specifications verbally. For instance, I call a carpenter to do a furniture work, and then we start giving specifications. Now, that's conversing with the carpenter now. I need 3 seaters, I need 5 seaters. Without giving detailed scope, what acceptance criterion or output specification you expect to get back. And then you discuss all of this without any written documentations, as little as it is, to know what you both parties expect, what you expect him to deliver to you, what you expect at the end of the day. So when it delivers those softwares or whatever it delivers those jobs, there are surprises. You are wondering, this is not what I'm expecting in my mind. But because the contract, as little as it is, was not documented, it was not specified, even as little as a little paper and pen, just jotting down to say, this is what you would do, this is what I expect, this, 1, 2, 3 items. When that was not done, so when the job is returned or done, or when the vendor believes he has satisfied you and delivers your job, you come and you are like, wow, this is not what I'm expecting. So how do you balance that? Thank you, sir.
I agree with you, Innocent. We all get very lazy. We all get very lazy at times. We just allow things to slide, right? And hope for the best. Laziness is never an approach to get quality service. Never, never, never. So we should be very careful how we make commitments around the work that we receive. If I know that I need to give out a job, I should take a biro and paper and write down what my expectations are. Even if I cannot spell out the type of wood inside, the kind of foam you should use, the kind of fabric, and I can say, I want a gold colored velvet material as the cover. I want a chair that can hold a 100 kilos size person. It will not break. I want a chair that can be sturdy and off the ground. I want foam that when I sit on it and I stand up, the foam will pick itself back up. If those are the kind of things I write down, and the guy say, yes, I know what can do this. I say, what is it? He tells me, I write it down. That is a contract. Let's not be lazy around the kind of contracts we put in place. I mean, for minor renovations, like what I did in my house when I was moving in, I was away on projects and my wife was supervising, and it was very frustrating. These guys are very happy when you don't write, because they have what their mind is made up on what they want to do, and they will just do it and start shouting and breaking bottles around your site, right? The moment you start becoming meticulous, those who have a bad intention will walk away. They will not even come back. They'll tell you they are busy, or tell you the money is not enough. Those who have good intentions will, be guided. So that's front-end effort to detail is always going to save the day. And then on the issue of low bidder or no low bidder, please don't allow bidders be the ones specifying the scope for you. If I don't know how to write the scope, right, I will first of all go for an RFP, ask for proposals, solution proposals from people, shortlist selling vendors, get them to give me proposals. And then I will now, read up several proposals, create my own scope and specifications, and issue it back to them to price. This way, I am now in control. That's the worst you can do. Don't allow people to come and look around, measure, and write, because it's going to be apple to orange to mango you're comparing, and there's no lowest bidder in such a process. That's a confused bidding process. So when somebody writes his own scope and says it's 10,000, the person writes his own scope and says 50,000, there's no lowest bidder between the two, because they're not bidding for the same thing. Jude. Jude, are you there?
Yeah, yes, I am. Good evening, Paul. Oga Paul, sorry, my Oga.
Welcome.
Yes, sir. And to the class. I just want to make an additional contribution to what you said to Michael, my co-class member, about variations and how to get the management to manage payment to contractors and all of that. I will tell you from my own experience in the company I work for, that the first thing we do is budget. Okay. We make sure that we have a bottom-up and then top-bottom budget system, where we, as the staff in facility management unit and property management, we draw up our own budget for the year. And then it goes to the management, and the management calls us. We discuss, we negotiate some of those terms for that budget. And then at the end of the day, they can still cut the budget as they want, because they hold the knife and the yam. So at the end of the day, it is that budget that guides us in whatever we are doing. And that, again, is that you also have to focus on the fact that there is, you need to manage your cash flow. Every company has a cash flow management system that they want to be sure that they are afloat at any time and they don't have to be cash crunched or put it at a corner. So what happens is that the management has already made it clear to everybody that this is it. And by the time you are negotiating with any contractor or vendor, you already have these two things at the back of your mind. You know the budget, and you also know your company's cash flow.
Yes.
And with that, you can now begin to know, to put the terms in your purchase order or your negotiations with the vendor, that based on this, the payment terms are so and so, and these are the milestones. And at the submission of your invoice, you'll be paid 30 or 45 or 60 days after the submission of the invoice. And you follow this through because you know that you already have this, and the company will not want you to go and put them in a very tight corner. You have already have that agreement with the company, and they have made it like, I'll put it like a policy now. It makes life easy for you as a facility manager or as a staff in that company. Now, it's not every company that have these laid down policies and ways of doing this. If your company does not have this, the best thing you can do at this instance is to also find out what is that minimum that the company is willing to go with, and what is that will break their back. And you try to manage your contractors within that range.
Yes.
Once you're able to manage them within that range, it becomes easier for you to also gain reputation as somebody who says something and can also back it up. Even if your company is not willing to, you can always hold them accountable for that. That's just the little I want to contribute to that.
That's very good.
Thank you very much, Jude. Mr. Paul's example on AGO was, it was always one of the craziest for the sites that I manage. Yeah. And I just used the electrical as another example. Sometimes even with the budget in place, when you talk about things that have to, consumables, and sometimes you have those budgets in place, and you will still have to exceed it. And even after the management has given approval for you to go ahead and engage the contractor, you do that, like I mentioned, we use MDQA, Material Delivery Quality Assurance. You can't do that without management approval. Yeah. So we would have gotten past all the area of getting management approval, maybe budget extension or budget addition and variations and all that. So it now becomes a problem when it comes to the payment, and even after the management has approved it. So, but I hear you, and it's always frustrating, and I'm sure a lot of the people in the class they know what we are talking about. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much. That's appreciated. All right, Toyin.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir. I need your advice on something happening in the recent past. We run a service apartment. So in the recent past, like normally before you come in, we have a contract, a lease agreement signed. So it's either you take the houses fully furnished and equipped, partially furnished and equipped, or unfurnished and unequipped. So in the past, we've had some tenants, like they come in, they meet fabric curtains, and then they request us to change it to wooden blinds. But we discovered, like, it's becoming a trend. So my boss came in this year and said they have to stop. So
I didn't quite get that problem you mentioned. It's kind of cracky. What became a trend?
Okay, the trend is like somebody has a curtain, a fabric curtain in their house, and then now they want us to change it to wooden blinds.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean. Yeah.
So it's becoming a trend. Some other ones will say, okay, remove the wooden blinds, bring in curtains. In the past, we used to do it, but like it's becoming a problem. It's costing us more. So my boss has given me the how do I call it now, to deal with that. So I'm like in between the management and the tenant on how to handle that situation.
No. I think the problem started with you making a change for one person. So be very careful about precedence. Once you start a precedence, be ready to run with it. So what you could have done is you would have had, as part of the contract, a management of change, right? So if you want something to change your apartment, of course we will do it, but this is going to be the cost.
Okay.
And just because of that MOC section, some people will live with their own. When they see another person get it, they will know that that person has money and he has spent his money. So they will not rush for it. Do you know that even if it is a very small thing they perceive as a gain, somebody else got that they have not gotten, they will become totally dissatisfied. Even if they were very satisfied before. Let's assume a footmat, something as simple as a footmat. Your own is okay. The next man just got a footmat that changed to red. Maybe his own was torn and you replace it with a red footmat. All of a sudden, my black footmat is now bad. So if you start a precedence, run it through. If you know it is not in contract to provide, amend the contract to show that there is a change of opportunity. Not that nothing can be changed. Things can be changed, but these are the change process that will be required. So for the others right now, don't say we cannot change your blinds or curtains or whatever it is. Just say it comes at a cost. You'll see the request numbers will drop. And those who are willing to pay for it will pay for it and move on, okay?
Yes, sir. Actually, I suggested to my boss initially, but he said we should change it, but now he's changing his mind. And now I'm the forefront to bear the brunt, and I'm the bad person now in front of everybody.
I know, Tony, I know. It's usually the case. So for you, when you want to communicate with this ones making the request, of course, the request is not really valid. They just know that because they did it for one person, they want to make a request. So what you are going to do basically is, would have loved to, but there's this amount my boss approved for changing this, and those first 5 who made a request within that time that money was available, we have done it. This is how much it costs to do one. Would you like to pay for it? You know, okay. you have to manage that relationship in such a way that it's not seen as unfair that you did it for one and you did not do it for the other, okay? So it's a dicey one, I understand, but of course, that MOC section that was not planted is what's coming, and then we now mistakenly made a change without a proper documentation of how that change takes place. Everybody else wants it. Yes, a reality, but just try and manage the relationship, okay?
Okay, all right, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Bamidele, final question.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Paul.
Good evening.
Thank you. As regarding the lecture today, in my company, there have been these current contracts that leads to cost overrun in terms of cost and what have you. So I have a quant survey. I'm a quant surveyor by training. So before coming fully into facility
management.
So, and immediately I got to where I'm working now, there's a whole lot of backlog of issues of contingency, cost overrun and all that. So, and I'm trying to see if the idea of contingency, in a normal project, you bring in this idea of providing, you are preparing your bill of quantities as a quant surveyor, you bring in idea of contingency. Can that concept also work in budgeting in line with facility?
Yes. Yes. Contingencies, but not miscellaneous.
Okay.
Miscellaneous is a criminal term that we see showing up in budgeting now. But contingencies must be tied to a risk management plan. What am I saying? All the likely escalations and variations that are possible, you should brainstorm and produce a risk management, a contingency budget.
Okay.
To respond to them.
Yes, sir. In a case whereby most of the time it's caused by the client, they don't know what they want, the customers, they don't know what they want. In the process, at the middle of the project, so they now talk to the vendor, no, change this door.
I agree. That plan, we simply say, contingency line item 1, clients changing their minds or clients changing of scope, right? How much do we estimate in case clients change their mind? We'll look at the historical data and say in the past projects or past FM years, we've had clients change their mind that cost us 5% of our budget, right? So which amounted to 180,000 last year. Let's make a budget for client changing his mind for 250 for next year. What's the next item? Rain fell and certain flooding happened and somebody's house was flooded and we had to go and change his carpet and replace some furniture. It happened last year, we prevented it, but in case it happens again, let's have another 250,000 here. Lightning struck and the certain component in the gen failed. That was not planned for in last year's budget that we spent. If it happens again, we prevented it, but in case it happens again, this is, so contingency budgets should be anticipated. Don't make a percentage, a blanket percentage of our budget is 10 million. Let's just add 20% for contingency. No, that's criminal.
All right.
Understand? So when you put a contingency amount, there should be another sheet that explains all your fears and concerns and variations that are possible that could lead to that amount of spending. So you put that sheet as an addendum.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. All right. Thank you, guys. Have a nice evening. See you again on today's what? Today's Monday.
Today's Monday.
So I'm teaching again on Wednesday. So that's the last time I'll be teaching this week. Okay. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.